The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it. Wednesdays here. It's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, and you. Thanks for spending in time, and we'll get to our starting five, our shout-outs in the StreamYard with the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Like and subscribe to the channel. Tell a friend. You could also catch us on the Hail Varsity Twitter feed at HVarsity Radio. Find Elijah on Twitter at Herbal Essence and at Schmidt_radio for me. We'll run down Mike Babcock from Hail Varsity and Hurrdat Sports. We'll check in with Babbers here in about 15 minutes, get his take on Mr. Dannen, Husker Hoops, Husker Baseball, all things Big Red. So we'll spend some time with Mike, also get his thoughts on the South Stadium project, as that is, a question that many Nebraska fans are wanting to know what direction it goes. Big meeting tomorrow, I think, for AD Dannen to get up to speed on. At least that's what he said yesterday. So we'll get there. We'll talk a little bit more of NIL and where you as the fan want your funds to go. Ceiling, where can the offense go as spring ball progresses? And the next step for that Nebraska defense. We'll cover that topic in hour two. Evan Bland joins us from the Omaha World-Herald. We'll get the lowdown, some Husker thoughts and NFL takes from Jeremiah Sirles, our favorite Husker NFLer, and then a Jock Doc to wind us down. 489-1240, 489-1240, 800-825-5865. Can also find us on the different social media platforms. We're streaming the show that way, as well as across the Hail Varsity Radio Network in Lincoln, in central Nebraska on ESPN Superstation, News Talk 900 in Columbus, and of course our friends at AM 590 Omaha's ESPN. Elijah, how we doing? You geared up? You shocked it's already Wednesday? Nothing that we see on the horizon with big news. We'll hear from Coach Rhule tomorrow. A little bit of an open practice tomorrow morning, so we jump right into the thick of spring football. But I do believe I sent you this text this morning when I came across these notes.
Yes, you did.
It is Whiskey Day. Is it International Whiskey Day? Is that what I said?
I believe so.
Yeah, International Whiskey Day.
It's funny because not only did you text me, you texted Hooksy, because I was in, for our local listeners here on KF4, I was in doing the morning hookup with Hooksy, and he goes, I got this text from Schmitty this morning, and I went, was it about International Whiskey Day?
So I sent it to him. My fault.
No, you sent it to me as well.
Okay.
You sent it to both of us.
Well, I got to clean my text chains up.
We knew it. Apparently, Schmitty at 7 a.m., his mind was on whiskey. I've had mornings like that, too.
Well, hey, it is hump day, right? So, well, usually I'm more of a domestic whiskey guy. I'm a Templeton Rye fan. Joe Papa, my late father, it was John Daniels, not Jack Daniels, because you knew, if you know Jack that well, you call him John. But if I have to go international, I guess I just go Jameson.
International. There's some Japanese whiskeys.
I've not been able to finish the Japanese whiskey, but it can burn the wood off of this table.
Yes.
It is so potent.
There's one I got from a buddy, which I will not attempt to pronounce because the name of it, whenever an American tries to pronounce it, sounds like a word that you should not be saying on the radio. Therefore, sure. I will not be saying it. That one was quite solid, though. You can DM me if you'd like to know what it is. But I will not be saying that one on the air. That one's solid. It's probably the only international whiskey that I've truly enjoyed. I got my brother a bottle of Japanese whiskey, but instead of oak barrels, it was aged in cedar barrels.
Okay.
Which was interesting. It was not something that I necessarily enjoyed. It really just tastes, like whenever you cook salmon, like a cedar plank, and it has that cedary flavor. Imagine that being the dominant flavor in your whiskey. You kind of go, this is not something
takes some getting used to. I can't even pronounce the Japanese whiskey. I got it. Big Jake talked me into. He was getting a bottle. I was getting a bottle, and we still have a lot of that. At least I have a lot of my bottle left with it. But now Jameson, Canadian Club, you can't go wrong, I guess. So we'll take some of your international whiskey selections or suggestions.
My thing is, like, if it's International Whiskey Day, does it mean I'm supposed to be respecting international whiskeys, or does that just mean it's a day of whiskey for the entire world?
I would look at it as it's a day of whiskey for the entire world. That's how I would go about it.
Okay.
Just don't ever sleep on a celebration opportunity.
See, I got the chance to go up to Omaha Whiskey Fest.
Yeah.
This year.
You tried a bunch of different.
Mm-hmm. And something I plan on attending. If you're a whiskey fan, highly recommend that. It's in association with our friends at Hurrdat. Highly recommend you check that out. That was awesome. They just give you like a little glass, and it's free, as many samples as you want walking around. Got so many. I have pictures of bottles somewhere in my phone. I've been trying to get a bottle of each of the one I've enjoyed. I haven't quite made it through that yet. That's a lot of whiskey to try to make it through. But I'm making my way through that list. I'm a whiskey appreciator, and maybe I'll have a little glass tonight before bed after I finish up with my workout, just in honor of the day.
Sure. Why not get that muscle milk? Trade it off.
Well, I could just add it to my protein shake.
Yeah, there you go, and you'll sleep well. Shout outs, Black Hills, Brennan in first. Patrick says boom. He is in second. Mr. Jeff Snitley, part of the Boulder Peace Treaty, in third. Moronic Figures checks in at number 4. Thoughts on what you guys want to see here from availability tomorrow. Also, Shot in the Dark UNO hockey tomorrow night. Good on you, boys. Keep up the good work. Don't know a ton about UNO hockey other than Hurrdat knocks its coverage out of the park with UNO hockey. So we'll go with the Mavs on that. What I want to hear is just how have the young pups looked, right? What's question 1, 2, and 3? How does the quarterback room look, right? How are the young wideouts progressing? How about the younger folks on the offensive line? What's the replacement spots look like at linebacker? Those younger defensive linemen. I mean, your year one guys on the defensive line in that front 7 or 6 technically. How are they going into year 2? Those are some of my questions, and we'll get a little bit of an answer tomorrow, but it's still early on. Moving on with the starting 5, Jeff checks in, and your grandpa is in. Brandon. Hello, Brandon. Good to see you. Eric checks in. NASCAR Eric says hello. Tiger Shark Diver says aloha. Spagoli. And crew is in. And Scott rounds us out along with Tuck and Walter. I'm sure we'll hear from Dion here in a little bit. But listen, it's a good day when we can talk football. And I want to go to some of the thoughts that Athletic Director Dannen was very honest about, and that is the couple of questions he took on the South Stadium project. And, you had former AD Trev Alberts put a feeler out there. He had this Q&A session where he did a survey, and he asked several tough questions to the Nebraska fan base when it comes to your fan experience. And you had 22,000 return that survey. And his big goal before taking off to A&M was that South Stadium project of $450 million. No guarantees it'd be ready by 2026, but demo was supposed to start January 2025. Some believe that might be a healthy part of the reason as to move on from Nebraska, that South Stadium project was going to be shelved or delayed. And Dannen's got to get caught up on it and assess what is realistic, what is attainable, and where do you want your resources going. And I ask this question. You as a Nebraska fan, what are you more likely to give toward? Are you likely in that big number of $225 million in private donations, which is just half of the project. And I grew up going to the stadium. I was in the old West Stadium. It's where we had our seats before the skyboxes were put in. And listen, man, the club seating, the amenities, the north end zone, the east expansion. I mean, Memorial Stadium's had to keep growing and keep developing, and it's such a cool place that you have fond memories of. And it's really the spot in the state that ties all of the state together. You love it, and you love some of those memories with family. That's what I take with me, every time I walk in that door is thinking of going with my folks. But it is 100 years old, and it's an icon, clearly. And I have no doubt that folks that have been in the South Stadium on the bleachers have a sore backside. I have no doubt that it's not super convenient, but your comfort level is I don't want to say secondary, but a lot of you have been there for years and years and years to watch the game, and you put up with whether it's a 7-degree wind chill or the wind's in your face for 3.5 hours or you're cooking in the sun. You're there for the game and to watch it. Now, from a concession standpoint and Wi-Fi, or a little bit more comfortable to make it more enjoyable, I understand that there's something that needs to be done. But from would you rather, one hand or the other, would you rather donate to that South Stadium project, or as a Nebraska fan, are you in the reality of NIL? And Clemson did this. They put a stadium project on hold to focus their elbow grease in on NIL fundraising. And right now, if the name of the game is, as Athletic Director Dannen put it, student athletes and taking care of them, the new world is not facilities, but it is NIL war chest. And, if you have more money in that war chest to be competitive for a high-level player, I don't know. I'm interested to hear in the stream or on the phone lines where you'd rather put your dollar. And again, that's generous of you. The fan base has been showing out in droves for decades. They show up in full force. They are so important. So they shouldn't be taken for granted at all, and they're not. And the second part of that is it's a choice because your money is stretched, I guess, in 2024 for a lot of folks.
And where I am at is kind of where Anonymous chimes in here on the stream. Oh, that's it. Here it is. I think I'd rather sit in a crap hole watching good football than sitting in luxury watching a team that sucks. And I think that is a great point. That's where a lot of Husker fans are today.
You'll put up with the discomfort for wins.
Yes. The question to me becomes, is something we've talked about. Now, what does college football look like in 5 years? Where you might get revenue sharing. What does the revenue of the athletic department look like in 5 years? One of the things I think Trev knew with the foresight is, hey, you can chip off a little bit of athletic department money. You can draw some excitement with Raiola and with Rhule and try to fund that South Stadium project. Now, the question to me is 5 years from now, whenever there's likely more inflation, whenever construction costs are likely higher, whenever, hey, maybe 10% of the athletic department's budget's getting chipped off to student athletes as a part of revenue sharing, is it still monetarily feasible to be able to knock down and rebuild South Stadium 5 years from now? Are you doing this now because this is what Nebraska needs now? Or are you doing this now because, hey, when Nebraska eventually does really, really need this, it's not going to be as possible to do as it is right now? I don't have those answers. I'm not the athletic director. I don't have all that sitting in front of me. That is a question that comes to mind, though, is timing-wise, is it not what you need right now, but what you need to do right now because of what it looks like 5 years from now, if you follow what I'm saying?
No, and right now, maybe Trev's foresight was this thing is going to get cranked back up to high level under Matt Rhule. And that's not only the hope, but that's a belief. I think Dannen has that same belief, but you were going to displace several thousand fans, and there wasn't going to be a guarantee that in 2026 your seats would be there. So the correct answer is all of the above. You need to be able to invest in your student athletes, have your NIL war chest, which you do have with the collective, and then whatever you have in-house with the athletic department budgeted, right? Because it's gonna be more controlled or more safe from the athletic department without the NCAA sticking their beak in. You're going to need to be able to do both, but right now the importance to me is NIL. Mm-hmm. Then figure out what you can do, revisit that survey, and then maybe not displace so many, but tweak and touch up some areas that need to be touched up.
And that's where I'm at right now. Is what I would love to see in the stadium is a new jumbotron on South Stadium to give the people in North Stadium and throughout the stadium a better viewing angle of replays and stuff like that. Widen the seats and make do for now. But then the other question becomes, is it worth it to spend that kind of money to put a Band-Aid on something for 10 to 15 years whenever you know you're going to need a real renovation somewhere down the road?
Well, maybe you just do it in chunks. Maybe you do one part of South where you have seat backs, then you do a next section.
But is that going to be helpful if what you really do need is to knock it all down and start from scratch in order to really get the changes that you need? That's the question to me. Is it worth it to put a Band-Aid on it for now? I
think you can go MacGyver for a little bit. And the key thing here, though, is, demand is high with the hope that exists.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager, Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. And we say hi to Mike Babcock with Hail Varsity and Hurrdat Sports. We're going to get Pete on the horn real quick. Babbers, hang tight for a second. Pete, what's up?
Hey, how you doing?
Good, thanks for calling.
I guess I got a different point of view, You have to almost work two jobs just to be able to afford tickets the way it is. If it's that hard to sit in the South Stadium, why not lower the ticket price for the South Stadium by $10? And who knows, in 5 years, maybe they'll be begging people to come to the games. I just get tired of interest rates and everything else is going up, and ticket prices just keep going up. And if we really want to think about the fans and we want to fill the stadium, I think we have to look at our ticket prices and try to do something on that end.
Pete, do you pay for a seat license, or do you just go when you can?
I go when I can. I used to go all the time, but anymore, you just can't afford it. By the time we drive down 140 miles and pay for parking and food and on, it gets very expensive.
And Ed, last question for you. Thank you for calling. Has it been hard to get in the vehicle and go with the record?
It's not so much the record. I really want to take my grandson this year down to a game. It's just the hassle. If it's on TV, almost all of them are on TV. I spend the tremendous amount of cash to go down and see a game. It is quite the experience, and I want my grandson to experience that. But it's getting to a point where you just can't hardly afford it.
Sure. Pete, thanks for calling in, bud. Appreciate you. No, it's not cheap. We say hi to Mike Babcock. Get his bi-weekly newsletter with Hurrdat and Hail Varsity at Mike B at HurrdatSports.com. Babbers, we're talking South Stadium. We'll get your take here on your first impressions of Dannen as well.
We also have some breaking news from Husker basketball.
Yes, CJ Wilcher is into the portal. We'll cover that here in a moment. But your thoughts on this this dragon to slay? What's the right answer here with fan experience and also the reality of investing and spending on student athletes, and that's another avenue your money can go if you're a fan.
Yeah, I think that Troy Dannen said yesterday that you're as likely to see him wearing 1890 initiative gear as Husker gear.
Mm-hmm.
His support for that, which is the athletic, the NIL funding thing, seems to be a priority for him. Recruiting and retention, he said. And, that's going to require NIL money. I think that, a lot of fans are probably are inclined to put money into the NIL situation because they want to get the players here to win. Mm-hmm. I think that's, to me, the bottom line is you've got to win. You mentioned that earlier, but you've got to win. If you can win, it changes the dynamic of everything. But in order to win in these situations, it looks as if money is going to be a factor. Mm-hmm. 1890 initiative, NIL money, and how that changes, I don't know. But the expense that you're talking about for this, and you're also losing at least a season mm-hmm. of ticketing in that section, right? Because, and I don't see this thing being completed in one season. I mean, to me,
I don't see it being completed for $450 million either.
Yeah. I mean, I just don't know if you can accomplish that. If you win, if you win at a certain level, fans are probably going to come regardless of what the situation is, because they have in the past. Mm-hmm. I'm not one of the people that has a ticket in that section, a season ticket. So, it's probably not fair for me to offer that opinion about whether it should be done or whether it shouldn't be done. But if I've got a season ticket there, I'm not going to have it for at least one season. How do I feel about that? And how are they going to accommodate me for that? I go back to what Bob Devaney always said, have more demand for tickets than tickets available. That's what you need to do. And when they built that extra section onto the east side there, I thought, maybe that money would have been better spent trying to do some of the things to make it more fan friendly and what existed there, rather than put another section on top of the stadium. Thinking of what Bob always said. And I know that's a long time ago, but I think the dynamic is still very similar.
And I think the question becomes, how do you generate more demand? Is it with a better fan experience? Is it with a better product on the field? It's kind of chicken or the egg type.
It's not even close. It's better product on the field is gonna absolutely blow up demand, because you've been able the last several years you've been able to get seats if you want to go. Period. Now that may shift when you sniff 9-10 wins. You get back to 8. You have some rousing victories. I mean, all that's on the doorstep here, and Nebraska fans feel that Rhule's the guy that's going to get them there. And I believe him when he says he's got a talented team. I think you're on the cusp of playing winning football again, playing really good football, having that buzz. But Babbers, you've known Nebraska for a number of years, and you can take for granted the 9 wins, the 10 wins, the big bowl games, but it's been a bit of a drought, and this thing's gonna reinvent, gonna pop again if they get to that winning time again.
Yeah, I think it will. I think the one thing, kind of a footnote to this whole deal, going back to Tom Osborne's 25 seasons, that there's this kind of attitude that people look at that and say, well, it was a straight trajectory, from when he took over in 1973 right up till 1997 when he had that third national championship. And it wasn't that way. It was up and down. He always had success, but people weren't happy because they weren't beating Oklahoma. There was that stretch. And then they had some opportunities in national championship situations, and they didn't win the national championship. And it was up and down. I mean, Tom considered the Colorado job in 78 early on in his career. And there were other opportunities. I don't know that he ever got to that point, but so it wasn't just a straight slide up to the top. He dealt with that kind of fan dissatisfaction as well, on a slightly different level. But yeah, I think Nebraska, for example, in this season coming up, if you look at the schedule, I think 5 of the first 6 games are at home. First 4 are at home. I think there's a chance to build some momentum if you can cut down on the mistakes, throwing interceptions and losing fumbles, so you don't constantly keep throwing the defense out there. I think Nebraska has I'm expecting Nebraska to go to a bowl game this season, and I'm expecting Nebraska to be better than 6-6 in getting there. You know, and I tend to be pessimistic about these things, but I think it's set up for that. But I think, again, the bottom line of what we're talking about is you have to win. Winning is what determines whether people are going to. You can make this the most comfortable stadium in the nation from a fan standpoint, and if you're not winning, there's going to be empty seats. And they're going to be nicer seats, but they're going to be empty.
Well said. Mike Babcock's with us from Hail Varsity, Hurrdat Sports at MD Babs on Twitter. Let's go to Athletic Director Troy Dannen. Your first impression, what did you think of the presser yesterday?
You know, I thought he showed a lot of enthusiasm and fire. You know, I think that's good for an athletic director. But, you know, the bottom line is, again, the athletic director's responsibility is to take care of the coaches and to take care of the impediments to their ability to win. You know, the example that he used, I think, was a snow plow, you know, moving that snow out of the way, clearing the path so that the coaches can get something done. So if he can do that, he's not coaching these teams. You know, that's his responsibility is to connect with the university to clear the path so that the coach can be successful. And he seemed very energetic about that. You know, recruiting and contention and retention are what we're trying to do here. That's our priority. And in order to win, and it's not just football, obviously, but football is at the forefront. It always has been. Volleyball and women's sports, football and men. And that's what it has to be. If you can be successful there, it has a filter down effect, I think. Well,
and Mike Dannen's shown throughout his career that football has been first and foremost. And you think about the next 5 years of college football, something we've talked about in this show, something Dannen hit on yesterday. Football might even become more king than it is now, if that's even possible.
Yeah. But again, you got to win. It'll fade at some point because fans are going to get frustrated and they're going to be, you know, the experience is not worth the expense, as
Pete, the caller.
Yeah. I mean, that's right. I mean, the expense has to be, you have to provide a quality experience, which begins with winning. And then it works down from there.
How do you feel about the prospect of winning? We'll know more from Coach Rhule tomorrow, Babbers. But this spring, as important, they're all important, but this feels, well, with a ton of possibilities, not only at quarterback, but, you know, a second year with Tody White, a second year with some of these bigger dudes from the lines of scrimmage, both sides coming back.
Yeah, no, I think that, you know, for me, it's always what's up front, offensively and defensively. You know, what can you build an offensive line that can open holes and allow you to establish some kind of a running game, and an offensive line that can protect your quarterback to give him an opportunity to throw the ball, and can your defensive line get the job done, which I thought the defensive line did last year, and you've got a couple of guys back from that. I think you feel good about the defense. Just don't keep putting them back on the field with turnovers.
Mike, what's coming up here about 15 seconds with your newsletter this week?
Well, a little bit about the passion that has followed basketball. I think that reflects where things are in the athletic department. Just the passion that was created, even though the men didn't manage to win a game yet. The women have been successful to this point in the past. So just, I think the passion, there was a great following to Memphis, obviously.
It was good times. Babbers, thanks for the time today, bud.
Thanks for having me, guys.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager. More of your phone calls, 489-1240 on the South Stadium project or NIL. Where would you send your money? Secondly, we'll get to the stream comments where folks have weighed in on this. Big thanks to Mike Babcock. We'll check in with Evan Bland here in 20 minutes. Jeremiah Sirles, thoughts on spring ball and his take on Dylan Raiola. And then we'll do a Jock Doc, 489-1240 or 800-825-5865. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. You have C.J. Wilcher, the news that came out. Mike Sauter knocking it out with the report out on Twitter probably about 10 minutes ago. And we'll talk a little bit here about Wilcher. As we kind of thought, Elijah, that Wilcher is a possibility of the portal when you look at his role as sixth man. You can't thank Wilcher enough for the January and into February that dude had, and just the effort, the maturity, and just the joy. I mean, it seemed like if Tominaga was off, Wilcher was on. At times you had both of them that were on a heater. And the longest tenured player of Nebraska's 23-24 roster is moving on from the program, and 7.5 points a contest, 53s made, just shy of 40%. Critical for this NCAA tournament run for Nebraska. You wish Wilcher well, but you got Blaze, you got Wilcher, you have Rice, and I'm missing the other dude.
Ramel
Lloyd. So those are your four guys in the portal. And it's tough, and you were hoping he'd be back, but I think if we're being honest, your core, and I'm not saying you don't want Wilcher back, you do, because of his experience and his talent, but you need Bryce back, you need Rink back, and of course you need Juan back. I mean, those are the three guys that I think make up your core, at least that started, and you're going to have some holes to plug, but Nebraska's going to do their work. You got Jamarcus that's been playing really good off the bench. We'll see if he transitions back to a starter next year, but this is about Wilcher, and not a good loss for Nebraska, specifically with what their offense has been, and that's been, when they're on a really good three-point shooting team.
And I think you can confirm on this one. Unfortunately, I did not call my shot on the air, but I said yesterday here in this studio this morning before Will and Hooksy went on the air, that C.J. Wilcher was a name that I was watching to potentially go into the portal because it made a lot of sense. A guy with 1 year of eligibility left, not in the starting lineup, has already completed his degree here at Nebraska. I think he will this spring, actually, I should say. And a guy that you feel like is good enough to start for a lot of teams across the country. Maybe not at the Big Ten SEC level, but a guy that can go start for a solid Big East school, a Mountain West school. I mean, he's going to have a lot of suitors in the portal based on what he put on film this season. He's a guy that's improved a lot, and you look at what's ahead of him. Guy like Bryce Williams, I don't think is going to get bumped from the starting lineup next year.
No.
Assuming he stays. A guy in Jamarcus Lawrence that I think has a lot of talent, had to settle back into a role kind of coming off the bench as a sixth man and took some of the minutes away from C.J. Wilcher as the year went on because you found Jamarcus was better in that role. Just a guy that I think with 1 year left wants to go get more playing time, wants to go be a starter somewhere else. It's not that big of a surprise to me. It's a loss for Nebraska, don't get me wrong. A school I really look at as being a potential landing spot for him close to home is St. John's.
Sure, he'll play with his brother.
Obviously a lot of time between now and Wilcher potentially finding a landing spot, a lot of moving pieces in the portal. That's a school I look at, though. And kind of the fit for Wilcher as being a guy, I think he'd go into a place like St. John's and start. He'd go a lot of places around the country and start. But on the flip side of things, it frees up another scholarship for Nebraska, frees up another scholarship for Fred Hoiberg in the portal. Reports out today that Frankie Fiddler has locked in an unofficial visit with Nebraska. That's something to follow. You had William Kyle from South Dakota State. He's apparently been contacted by Nebraska. We don't know if there's a visit coming or not, but that contact has happened. Fred Hoiberg's already working in the portal, and now he's got another scholarship to work with. It's a loss, but you thank C.J. Wilcher for his years of service here. Made it through some awful, awful years to get the payoff this year, to make it into the NCAA tournament. A guy that refined his game and really turned himself into a solid basketball player, and a guy that could make it in the Big Ten after a couple years of a lot of this fan base, myself included, doubting whether or not he was ever going to be a fit for the Big Ten. Well, he made himself a fit for the Big Ten this year, and finished off his Nebraska career the right way. You wish him well into the portal. This is one of those cases of a guy that goes into the portal where, yeah, it's a loss, but you can't blame the kid. Like, yeah, if I was in his shoes, I'd want to get more playing time my final year of college basketball, potentially my final year playing competitive basketball overall.
Yeah, it's a role thing, I think, and he can find a bigger role, and if that's what he wants, he'll find it somewhere, and he'll do well. Wish CJ well, Wilcher well, but you got Janowski and Frager coming in as freshmen, Mater Diop as the sophomore, and I can't wait to see what that dude becomes if he stays healthy. Just given Fred's track record of development, Jamarcus is a junior. You still got Gary, Rink, Bryce, and we don't know about Ulyss. He's a senior to be still on the roster. But you need a 5, you need a point guard, and you want to go get another 3-point dude to try and supplement what you lost with Wilcher. But he transferred in from Xavier. Does he find his way back to the Big East is the question. We've been asking a lot about South Stadium or NIL. Where would you send or spend your money? And more comments we'll get to here in the stream. And you have 3-putt checking in here. 3-putt Mitch. Stadium needs a retractable roof for a year-round facility. I love it. I think that'd be great.
I don't.
Really?
No.
All right.
I don't think football should be played indoors.
Uh-huh.
As simple as that.
And most of the NFL would disagree with you.
Yeah, and I hate it. I hate it.
3-putt Mitch also wants us to call Uncle Warren for $3 billion and just get the funding for both handled. And, Brandon says...
Good luck with that one.
Don't tell me the secrets, but South Stadium allows field access with ease if you just pretend you belong. I'm bolting out of there earlier half times at times just for the old post-game show, the Real Red Reaction show. Jordan checks in on the stream and says, leave the South Stadium alone. Imagine we're playing our best ball in almost 3 decades and 22,000 people can't attend. South Stadium is the blue-collar part of the stadium, and I love it. Good to hear from you, Jordan. And that's no doubt. Even with the student section on the east and the south side, when Memorial Stadium would get cranky in a good way, and it's just screamed voices and maybe a drop of international whiskey or two with some of those big games. I mean, it turns into a madhouse, and it's a sight to behold. And I think it can get back there. Dion's suggesting porta potties in the south end zone. Is that an upgrade?
In the south end zone or like in the south end zone area of the stadium?
I don't know.
Imagine that going down field level behind the goalposts for their porta potty.
He missed the kick. Got the fan. Doink. We'll wind down this first hour. We'll
imagine a play in the back of the end zone knocking over a porta potty.
That'd just be wrong. Not me. Your turn. Jeff's got a comment. We'll get to more of your thoughts. 489-1240 or 800-825-5865. Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you one final time this hour. It's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Can find the show Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Download the podcast. Tell a friend. As we get into hour 2, Evan Bland, Jeremiah Sirles going to be with us here on Hail Varsity. Subscribe and like the YouTube channel, Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Follow the Twitter feed as well at H Varsity Radio, and find us on the different social media platforms. 489-1240 to get in. And the money, where's it flowing out of your pocket for Nebraska? Do you want it towards the South End Zone project or more towards NIL?
And some people are funneling their money towards an effort to get me to show my feet on stream yet again.
Again. No. But he did apologize, Osama bin Frex, about being late to the party. Another comment that's more on point. Is it another 99 cents, $2, dollar? What was offered?
Oh, none that time.
Okay. So there's 3 requests, and there was a lowball offer.
Yeah.
At first.
Send that money over to the South Stadium expansion or NIL or something.
Yeah.
It's going to be better suited that way.
Don't ask for any feed pics. Jeff chimes in with construction background. Love hearing from Jeff. I did some work for the new facility, and as long as that stadium has been there, South End Zone should be torn down and start fresh. There were so many headaches trying to patch it together over time. Totally understand that perspective, and I can only imagine that with the age, right?
Have you ever seen, I can't remember who did this. Was it Evan who did the story last fall as Memorial Stadium turned 100 about all the weird quirks within Memorial Stadium, of the doors that lead to nowhere, the patio that's there for no reason with no real access to get to it, the stairway to nowhere. There's like a bathroom that has like one stall or something like that is out of use now. Like very, very weird, some of the quirks within the stadium as they has been patched together through the course of 100 years. Like I get that.
Well, and I think the railing and the incline where you had to weave up to the west balcony pre-skyboxes.
Yeah.
I mean, that was
perilous.
Yeah, but it was like I was going back in time, man. It was cool. And then the old windows. I mean, the old West Stadium windows. But what's really cool is the old front, and the older parts of the stadium have been built around, so you still get to see them. And it's in existence. That thing was incredibly built. We're talking 100 years, and it's stood the test, seen a lot of ball games, been through grass, been through turf, been through field turf, AstroTurf. I mean, all of that. You can still go purchase the winningest turf, AstroTurf in college football.
Well, I mean, simply put, it's made it through, I think now we're at the point you can say it's made it through lifetimes, plural, of Husker fans.
It's been through generations.
Yes.
I mean, there's some folks whose great-grandfather or now great-great-grandfather has had seats. So, no.
There's no easy solution.
I do have a solution right now. This is a
age.
public service announcement. Tiger, shark, diver. Asking if Elijah has OnlyFans. No.
That's not a question. That's a statement, and it's a lie.
There is no.
I do well enough for myself in radio. I don't need that.
Thank you. Thank you, Elijah. All right. Hour 2. We'll check in with Evan Bland and Sirles.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back with you. It's Hour 2. It's Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager, Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. It's kickoff the hour with Evan Bland, Omaha World Herald, at Evan Bland OWH on Twitter. Some football thoughts from Evan, sneak in some baseball and hoops as well. Evan, how we doing? Thanks for the time.
Hanging in. Yeah. How are you guys on another slow news week?
It's been a month straight of news, breaking news, searches, short searches, press conferences galore. Spring football's now into day 2, and we'll hear from Matt Rhule tomorrow. So, yeah, we've been reactive in a good way, and we've chewed on the South Stadium project just because, Athletic Director Dannen was going to get up to speed here probably since he settled in, had his presser yesterday, some meetings on it, and asked the question, will it help us win? We've been talking about that, comfort, convenience, and the product on the field. And the kind of the resources, the war chest, the important thing right now in college football is to have a monster collective. Nebraska has that. And just want to get your take. We've had really good feedback from our listeners on South Stadium. And folks, if we're to shade it one way or the other, they just want to see really good football, winning football, more so than comfort. And we had Pete call in as well about just the pricing in general's pretty expensive to take his grandkid. That's just one voice. But, what's your take on it with this South Stadium project? Do you think you'll have some more answers? There's lots of questions about it. Does it get shelved, or maybe it's a little tweaked and it's easier to collect said tweaked money after a 10-win season?
Yeah, I think ultimately it'll probably be some more modest version of what was presented last fall. Maybe the question is what can be done with $100 million or $200 million as opposed to $450, and what that could look like short of a full-on demolition and rebuild. It's funny. I think back to something that Trev Alberts actually said a few years ago about facilities in general, which was that they should reflect the status of a program as opposed to trying to sort of set the tone for what that program can be. And so I think it makes a lot of sense that maybe you do table this thing while Troy Dannen settles in and gets a lay of the land and takes the temperature of the donors and sees where things are. Maybe it gives Matt Rhule and Nebraska a chance to get back to that bowl game and maybe have a breakthrough season. And I'm sure that they would find fans and some of your higher rollers would be probably more willing to donate once there's some tangible on-field momentum and excitement and things of that nature. So it seems like on a lot of fronts, like it would make a lot of sense to reassess, to sort of settle in with this new leadership, let a football season play out, and then see where this thing goes. Because I do think in this current climate, like, you have to sort of evaluate what's the best use of your dollars. And I thought Dannen put it pretty well when he said, like, okay, everyone at some point, even schools like Texas A&M, at some point there is a limit to the money somewhere. And so how do you allocate that in a way that does give you that best chance to win? And we've seen Nebraska invest in certainly facilities for student athletes and what they have with the football program. NIL is going to continue to be something you're going to want to invest heavily in. And so where on the pecking order does South Stadium fall? And this idea that you want to keep fans in the stadium as opposed to watching it from home or streaming or all the other options that they have now. So that's something they're going to have to decide, but my guess is it'll be some smaller version of what was presented previously.
Evan Bland with us here from the Omaha World Herald on Hail Varsity Radio. And Evan, do you have concerns that the landscape of college football 5 years from now, as it's ever changing? Dannen spent a lot of time yesterday talking about that during his time at the podium. Do you worry that the landscape of college football will make it more difficult to put that kind of money into a project with potential revenue sharing with student athletes coming down the road?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a huge expense. I mean, we heard even just a year or two ago what expense and how much planning had to go into it for Nebraska to allocate money for the Alston Fund, for the scholarships that student athletes can have, and if they achieve a certain academic standard, they would receive a few $1,000s. Like, even that was something that I know Trev and Nebraska and other schools had to budget for. And so that, relatively speaking, is small potatoes compared to what you're talking about with revenue sharing and what percentage that could look like. And, does that, you would imagine, come out of television revenue and potentially ticket sales, and, like, who knows where that starts and where that ends. That would adjust coaching contracts, and so you factor all that in with whatever NIL may additionally look like in 5 years, and yeah, all that seems a lot more pressing than a new facility or renovating a part of a stadium where people can currently sit and enjoy a game. Maybe it's not perfect. I've sat in South Stadium and gotten a sunburn on the right side of my face before as a student, and it's a long walk to the bathrooms down there, so it's not perfect, but when you talk about how are you competitive moving forward, I just think there are more and more areas where you're going to have to invest financially before you get to that. And quite honestly, you look at the North Stadium facility that just is coming online now, and as gorgeous as it is and as amazing as it is, I wonder if that thing had been started 3 years later, if it would have even happened because of the financial investment that's gone into it and how much things have changed. So I don't know if now's the time to make such a major investment in the stadium. But, again, it's so hard to know what things will look like in a few years, and probably the most pertinent route would not be to spend your rainy day fund on something that is probably viewed as a luxury.
Well, and the luxury is going to be quarterback, is going to be left tackle, is going to be edge rusher, is going to be defensive tackle, hybrid linebacker.
High-level radio broadcaster as well.
Well, sure, right. But in all sincerity, it is the talent you can acquire and retain, right? And, Tiger Shark Diver weighs in, says, so is Dylan starting day one or what? That's one question in our stream. Let's get to that difference maker, the quarterback spot. What are you thinking we hear about so far so good with the quarterback spot tomorrow from Matt Rhule?
Yeah, I think it'll be the ongoing major headline of the spring. Certainly tomorrow will be that first chance. And we've heard a lot about Raiola and Kalen through the first couple months in terms of what they've done in mat drills. We've seen Raiola being involved in recruiting, especially in the transfer portal. But now this is that first phase where their on-field football performance is being evaluated. And that's obviously just as important as all those other intangible pieces. So, we're going to hear from Matt Rhule, what his assessment of that is. As camp goes on, we'll hear from teammates and other coaches as well. I think what's most interesting about that particular competition is that we'll have a pretty decent idea of how Nebraska feels about it by the end of spring. And you can think about quarterback competitions over the years, there have been some where Nebraska's taken it into the fall. I think the tell is going to be what Nebraska does in the portal right around the end of the spring game and once they get into May, because and Matt Rhule said it openly, if they feel like they need to add somebody at that point, a veteran, somebody who can sort of be a security blanket, then they can do that. And if they feel like the three scholarship players they have with Heinrich Harburg and Kalen and Raiola are enough, then they're going to move forward with them. And so it's a really critical point in terms of evaluating what you have. I thought Rhule said it interestingly last week when he kind of said, okay, when you get into the scrimmages and some of these workouts, you're going to have these moments where the quarterbacks are going to struggle, and what's their response? Or are they going to kind of shy away? Does their level of competitive nature sort of shine through in that moment? And so I think it'll be sort of a mix of statistical, evaluations as well as sort of anecdotal looks at what they have. What are the guts of these guys just in terms of how they practice? And that's going to lead to a decision that'll obviously majorly affect what the season looks like here in the fall.
Well, the big thing is the maturity level. You can have all the arm talent in the world and be physically gifted even at a young age, but the mental part is so key, and if it's not coming easy, and Rhule's talked about doing things you hate, right? Well, it's no fun to struggle. It's no fun to throw a pick. It's no fun to be confused by a defense. How do you respond and get better from a setback? And I think Nebraska's got a couple of guys that are young in Dylan and in Kalen that are, above all, fierce competitors. And I think you got an older guy that is just like that with Harburg. I mean, yeah, he probably wasn't treated real well with his former offensive coordinator. He got a chance to shine and do what he could do, but he's got to work on being, a complete quarterback in the passing game, the consistency part of it. He's got arm talent. But I think you got 3 dudes there that are just going to keep on chopping wood. It's kind of my take early on right now. Easier to say. We'll know more when we get comments. But I think you have 3 guys that you kind of profiled their mentality a little bit on top of their arm talent.
Yeah, totally. And we got a sense of what Heinrich Harburg's all about last year. He was just as tough of a runner as he was a thrower, and Rhule said he's reworking some of his throwing mechanics to get the ball out a little bit quicker. People locally know what Daniel Kaelin's been all about, and he was someone who was around the facility last fall, even before he enrolled. He was a major part of the recruiting efforts, stuck with Nebraska even when Raiola made the 11th hour decision to come back to the Huskers. And obviously Raiola himself, who has played high-level high school football, who's done the showcases, who's been around NFL quarterbacks and professional athletes for a lot of his life. So in that sense, these guys are probably older than their teenage years, at least in the case of the freshmen, would indicate. And so, yeah, it's about coming out and doing it. And Rhule said they're going to have more reps this year than they've ever had before, and that he's ever maybe put on before with some high schoolers and hit the quarterbacks that he's had in the spring. So it's, now's the time. You got to maximize this window. They'll be in pads here, obviously, as they ramp up and get into spring workouts. But it's just a really, I think, critical evaluation piece where the coaches, they have a sense, they think they know what they know about the quarterbacks, but now it's just going to be a little bit all the more so. And again, like, the decisions that are made now are going to be major impacts in how this next season goes. Who's the starter? Do they need to add somebody? All that stuff's going to be addressed as we go.
Evan, at what point do you think the media will first get a chance to chat with Dylan Raiola? That's something I'm kind of watching for. Just in terms of maturity, that's one of the things we talked about with this quarterback battle. At what point do you think Dylan Raiola first gets the chance to stand up at the podium, meet with the media? Is that this spring? Is that this fall? Is that somewhere even further down the road? What's your thoughts on that?
I think it'll happen this spring. I don't know that, but just thinking about in the past when there have been quarterback competitions, whoever the main players are, we usually get a chance at least once in the spring to talk with them and kind of see what they're all about. I wouldn't imagine that it would be this week. I mean, maybe it will. Maybe they'll bring him out there tomorrow and surprise all of us. But my hunch would be maybe more in a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks down the line as things are sort of established and they let some of the older voices, the veteran players, come out and say what they have to say. They put Jamal Banks out there in front last week, and he hadn't taken any kind of a snap for Nebraska previously. So I think some of it is who do you trust? Who do you feel like can be a voice for your team and sort of add to the message and the vibe that Coach Rhule wants to put out there. And from what I've heard from Raiola speak before, like, he's pretty thoughtful, and so I don't think he would have a problem handling himself. But yeah, that'd be my guess. Would be maybe early to mid-April we'd hear from Dylan.
Evan, about a minute. Husker baseball off to Northwestern. The K-State game canceled, but Baseball America out with their field of 64. Nebraska right now as a 2 seed is an automatic bid recipient in Norman against Oklahoma. What do you think?
Well, I think right now Nebraska would be pretty disappointed if they weren't hosting a regional, to be honest with you. I mean, you look at the handful of Big Ten teams that have done that since Nebraska's been in the league, and all of them are about on the pace that Nebraska is right now, 17-5, taking care of business in the non-con in the midweek, and obviously you got to follow up and do that in the Big Ten. But I think they would feel like if they're a 2 seed at where they are at this moment, they'd probably be a little bit disappointed. If that were to play out, it'd be pretty interesting. It'd be a rematch of opening weekend when Nebraska was an out away from finishing off Oklahoma in that third game of the season or whatever it was. And but it does. This has a team that has a solid look of an NCAA tournament squad at this point. I think they're probably the favorites going into Big Ten play right now, just because of the balance that they've had. And now it's now it gets into more of the exciting stuff. What can the seeding be? Could they host? A lot of that's going to play out here in the next couple months.
Follow him on Twitter at Evan Bland, OWH. Read him with the World Herald. Evan Bland with us. Evan, thanks for the time. We'll check in again. Appreciate you jumping in.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
All right, good to talk with Evan. We'll talk some more Husker football. Jeremiah Sirles on the way with Hail Varsity.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Great to have you back. It's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager, Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, and Jeremiah Sirles with us at Sirles71_HSKR. Sirles, what's the good word? Thanks for the time.
Yeah, good to be back. Finally off the road for really my busy part of the year. Got back from North Dakota yesterday and was in South Dakota on Monday. So braved through the storms. My truck is disgustingly covered with ice and slowly de-thawing in the driveway right now. But good to be home a little bit and kind of get off the road for at least a few weeks here.
Of the Jeremiah Sirles pre-draft travels, do you have a top-ranked city that you visited?
I mean, Indy's always great. Right. Indy's always super fun with the combine. I did go out to Lynchburg, Virginia this year to Liberty University, and that university is gorgeous. I mean, gorgeous. And that was probably my favorite trip this year for sure.
So how is the pre-draft going? You've talked to a lot of kids, and you know what? Draft just around the corner. Got to be excited.
Yeah, super pumped. You know, this is kind of the finish line here, right? All the work from getting these kids signed to get them in their all-star games and through the combine and then through pro day. And now it's just kind of more of the wait and see. And these kids can now start training to be football players again and not athletes and run around their underwear Olympics. Right. So that's always fun for them. But I'll tell you this, it was fun to catch up with a lot of the Midwest scouts, which I obviously know pretty well, and hear them talk about that quarterback in Nebraska. Right. Like that was kind of really cool to hear some guys be like, man, how was Lincoln's pro day? Right. I couldn't be there. I was at another one. It's like, how was Lincoln's pro day? They're like, oh, it was good. But man, that quarterback. Right. If I just kept hearing that over and over and over again. Like, man, you're going to want to have a top pick in a few years if that guy can stay healthy. And that's what you wanted to hear about that kid. And like, I guess he kind of stole the show at pro day. Sorry, Quentin Newsom and Omar Brown. But, you know, for overall to have your freshman quarterback who's been on campus for like 3 months come out there and sling it in front of scouts and have them be impressed, that's saying something.
You know, that's big, and that leads us into spring football. And Sirles, pretty intriguing, a lot of optimism, some kind words from Matt Rhule and his pre-spring presser. And it's just been a whirlwind last 2 weeks with Trev and, of course, Dannen. Rhule's been, you know, the constant down there. And I think he's really excited, you know, as the spring session is underway. But obviously, yeah, Dylan, Kalen, Harburg, the quarterback spot is under the microscope. And you've kind of laid out what some of your folks in the NFL have been telling you. I want to get your thought, though, with a young quarterback. You played with Team Magic. What's a realistic ceiling for a first year when we talk offensive line experience, running back room if they're healthy experience? You bring in experience at wideout with a couple of portal guys and a good young room. Tight end looks pretty good, but that missing piece is always quarterback, young or old. What do you think about the offense? What can it be?
Yeah, I mean, you obviously don't want to put everything on your young QB's plate, right? And even Taylor, and I mean, I wasn't here when Adrian was a true freshman, you know, but I think back to that season and watching that season when Adrian was a true freshman, and he didn't have to do it all. He had Stanley Morgan. He had Divino Zigbo, right? He had pieces around him that could elevate the play of everyone, and then it was just kind of more of go be an athlete, make the plays you can do with your feet, and then throw the ball where it needs to be on time. And I think that's nothing against Adrian. I love Adrian, and I mean, he's a client of mine, and I think he's going to hopefully be the starter for the Stallions this weekend. But I look at Rayola's arm talent compared to Adrian's, and I think it's going to be a little bit vice versa of like Adrian Martinez freshman year, right? Adrian Martinez freshman year was create, run with your legs, and go be really fast. I think the other is going to be like, hey, make a big play with your arm. Right, throw that ball as far as you can and let that receiver go get it. Fit it in that tight window, right? Not asking him to do it over and over and over again, but letting him use his strength, which is his arm talent, to win you football games. And so you don't want to put too much on him, but at the same time, you don't want to pull him back from some of the things that he's really capable of doing.
And Sirles, with that arm talent, that natural ability he has as a freshman, one thing I said earlier this week I want to get your thoughts on was that the most important thing that I'm watching for in spring football is how successful the Husker rushing attack looks. Not because I don't trust Rhule, but because as a freshman, you expect a guy's going to make some freshman mistakes even with that talent, and you want to take some pressure off of him. You're an offensive lineman, so I have a feeling you're going to agree with me there, but what's your thoughts on the importance of the Husker rushing attack?
Yes, 100%. You're right on the nose, Elijah. I mean, look at what won the national title this year. Michigan, running the absolute piss out of the football over and over and over again, right? I mean, it was boring to watch, but it was fun as an lineman to watch the gap schemes and the zone schemes and holes opening like the Red Sea, right? And when you can rely on that and have that be we don't care what you line up in, we don't care what front you put out there, we don't care what bodies you put out there, we're just going to run the football. It alleviates so much of the quarterback. So, yeah, I agree. I want to know what our identity is. Last year, zero identity in the run game. Little of this, little of that. Oh, 1 week we're this, 1 week we're that. We're try pin pull, we'll go downhill. We have to have a bread and butter where on a critical situation we can fall back and go, hey, we're running outside zone, right? And I don't care what the front is. There's no kill. There's no check. We're running it. We're going to get 4 yards. And I want to find that through spring ball. And, you kind of get narrowed down in spring ball, but I'd like to see us come out of spring ball with a staple running game of what we can build off of with the tricks and the gimmicks and the motions and everything going through in that.
Sirles, back to Rhule. Has anyone thrown out comps about him to you? I mean, his favorite player is Patrick Mahomes. The way he kind of moves his body, flicks it around. Stylistically, does that make sense?
I refuse to compare anyone to Patrick Mahomes. I can't. Listen, I have heard it, and maybe it's because I'm just in the pre-draft process right now, and if I have to hear the words generational talent one more time, I'm going to throw myself off a bridge because we use that phrase so lackadaisically now, right? Every year it's like, oh, generational talent. It's like, that's not the definition of generational talent, right? You don't get one every single year, right? But I do think when you see Mahomes' playing style, more people, it's like Steph Curry. Now there's more high school kids that want to shoot 3-pointers. Right? You see what he does and the way he can create. Yeah, it's similar to that. But, I haven't heard many comps, and until I see him play in a college game, it's going to be hard for me to really put a comp out to him.
Fair enough. We've hit the offense pretty well, and ceiling-wise, that's the TBA, right, or TBD, what can be determined offensively. A lot of work before kickoff against UTEP. But how much better can the defense get in your estimation?
Yeah, going into year 2 of the Tony White system here and looking at, okay, how are these guys going to learn how to disguise these blitzes more? How are these guys now going into second spring? It's no longer a true install, right? Last year's spring ball was purely install, know my terms, listen to how I talk, listen to how we communicate, understand the base level of this playbook. You now come back into year 2 and you've got a bunch of guys from a very young team that come back, a bunch of dudes that played a bunch of meaningful snaps. And you now saying, okay, we're no longer installing, we're tweaking, right? Hey, this play, you all know what it is. How do we make it better based on our off-field self-scout that we did this summer or this winter, excuse me. And how do we come back and say, okay, we did this really well. Let's tweak it to do it better. Hey, we did this really poorly. Like, how do we get better at this really poorly stuff? So you can be much more targeted this spring on what you want to accomplish on the defensive side of the ball instead of just trying to rush and get your entire defense installed before fall camp.
Sirles, as we look at Nebraska's future with the transition in the AD chair, really enjoyed hearing from Troy Dannen, and he's very upfront, and he's going to be partners with his head football coach, and he's wanting to be partners with the collective, and kind of get your reaction to this new world of college football with the playoff structure that's set up, and down the road here, likely revenues sharing with athletes, with student athletes, and just the need to be in good standing and have a great relationship with the collective.
You have to. If college football in the next few years is going to look a lot more like the NFL. You're going to have scouting departments. You're going to have personnel staff. You're going to have GMs that are going to tell the coaches who to recruit, right? Like, hey, we've identified through our scouting department that we want to recruit these guys, go recruit them. right? And I don't know if that's good or bad for the sport, but that's what's going to have to be. And then the collective is going to be the power that drives it money-wise, right? Because make no doubt about it, money is going to make a big push, and it already is, but it's going to make an even bigger push down the road as far as when it comes to keeping players in your program, right? That's where it's going to be. It's going to be like free agency, right? You have a player that's done really well for you early, you got to pay him or someone else will. And so that's more the model that's going to come, and I think he understands that. You know, you talk about a guy that his whole team up in Washington after the board was stripped because of NIL, right? Like, so he understands the nature of what the NCAA is going to. He understands because he was coming into the Big Ten, right? So he understands kind of what the Big Ten is. And I think he's saying all the right things. He's really going to understand what he has a vision for, it sounds like. And now it's just a matter of how quickly can we implement that vision, right? Because there's not a lot of time between now and football season.
So as we kind of wind it down here, the story is out, believe it to be true, that Dannen was on the 15th hole of 18 holes with some boosters. He gets a call from Nebraska and never returns to finish up those last 3 holes. He just Irish goodbye to everybody. You ever pulled anything similar?
No, but this makes me think of Midnight Mel. That's the he's going to get a nickname like what is it? Beers on the 16th, right? Like beers on the 16th at 9 and then just disappear.
What is it? The old Happy Gilmore, the ninth green at 9.
Ninth green at 9, baby. The ninth green at 9. I mean,
where's something nice?
Yeah, at least he didn't go back and lie through his teeth. I can respect that, right? At least you didn't go back. What was that? Oh, wife's wanting us to be home for supper. Right, like at least he didn't go back and do that. He just kind of owned it, and away he went.
Hey, it's Nebraska. Peace.
Who is that over there? Don't worry about it.
It's Little Red in the bushes. You will not make this putt.
Yeah.
Sirles, last thought here, about a minute reaction to some of the changes in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a crazy offseason. You know, crazy to think that someone decided to pay Kirk Cousins $180 guaranteed money at 36 years old, coming off an Achilles injury. But I'll say this, I'm glad it's not the Vikings. I love watching the guards get paid. I love watching the guards get paid. You saw multiple guys make over $20 million a year in the guard position. And then, you start looking at who's going to be contenders next year and who won the offseason. It's TBD, but I think the Mahomes world is still very much his world. We're all just living in it, and they're gearing up to go back for a three-peat.
Well, you better watch out for the Broncos next year.
Sure.
Watch out for what?
Yep.
I think the lines came out 4.5. I think 4.5 was the win over under. What are you taking right now? Today,
under.
March 27th.
Under.
Well,
wow. As of right now, Jarrett Stidham's the starting quarterback.
That ain't gonna happen, no. Yeah. I hope
Daniels at least visited today, Elijah. That's a good thing.
Yeah. I think Jaden Daniels, listen, JJ McCarthy, he's also making climbs up boards, but we'll see.
That seems like the ultimate pre-draft smoke of teams being like, yeah, we'll love McCarthy, and then he's going to drop to 28.
I know we're running out of time here. If he gets drafted in the top 5, it will be the greatest fleeced move that Jim Harbaugh has ever done to the NFL. Ever. Because guess when he started gaining all that speed when he was like, when this process is all said and done, I think JJ is going to be one of the best quarterbacks come off.
You take him so I don't have to.
Yeah. Oh, he's lucky he went to the Chargers or else he would have had to put his money where his mouth is.
Sirles, be good. Get healed up. Thanks again.
Absolutely will do. Go Big Red.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it. It's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager. Time for a Jock Doc Wednesday, Nebraska Orthopedic Center. Dr. Brandon Seifert's with us. Dr. Brandon, it's opening day tomorrow, and we're all excited for it. And some Yankee news, but not the Yankee we normally talk about. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great, fellas. How y'all doing?
We're good. We are, hoping that there's some warmer weather in store. And we're going to focus in on Oscar Gonzalez, outfielder for the Yanks, suffered a right orbital fracture. Did that earlier in the week. Was taken to the hospital after fouling off a ball. Went from his bat to his orbital bone during that exhibition game down in Mexico. And kind of tell us a little bit here. We know the orbital area, but just how dicey these injuries in this situation is.
Yeah, absolutely. So, definitely a topic we've not discussed here on the show before. Moving a little bit outside of my area of expertise, but know enough. This is sports medicine injuries to be well aware of this. But basically, as you're talking about the orbit, essentially what that means, that's essentially your eye socket. So where the what people think of as the eye itself, okay, that's referred to as the globe, okay, and then basically the socket that it sits in is called the orbit. And obviously you've got it's kind of circular, it's surrounded on all sides. And so what happened with this gentleman was it's called an orbital fracture. And so basically anytime you have a broken bone or a fracture kind of involving the orbit itself, whether it's at the bottom, the inside, which is called medial, outside, or superior on the top, it can be in those areas. Most classically, these things occur at the bottom, so we call it like an inferior orbital fracture. Typically, that area is about the softest. It's almost kind of like an eggshell. So that's typically where we're going to see it. There's occasionally there'll be some time when you'll start to see a fracture more to the inside. We call it kind of a medial wall fracture, but that has more kind of thicker, kind of porous, what we call ethmoid bone behind it. So we see that less often. Obviously, there's the fracture piece of this that's, important, but more importantly is, what does that structure support? Well, obviously, it's the eyeball, it's the globe, and that's the thing you worry about kind of long-term is trying to avoid or protect the globe itself, which, again, is the whole reason why you have an orbit with bones around it.
It's Dr. Brandon Seifert with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Dr. Brandon, this feels like more of an injury that you get whenever somebody steps in the ring with Mike Tyson. We'll see how Jake Paul does a little later this year, or maybe Francis Ngannou for the MMA fans. Not something you hear very often in baseball. A lot of times you get the cheat guards that come down and cover part of that area, but apparently that wasn't enough in this case. Yeah, absolutely. And, kind of an interesting deal. It's more of a foul tip. I mean, typically you're going to see this more where you're out in the field, somebody hits a hot shot back at the pitcher. Maybe somebody gets the ball thrown at them and they're out in the field somewhere. So, foul tip-wise, pretty uncommon. And in his scenario, fortunately, it sounds like didn't have any extensive trauma to the globe, which is good. But typically with these, what you worry about, obviously, is the globe trauma. But the other things you worry about is, obviously, to move the eyeball of the globe, you have to have muscles surrounding the eyeball that attach onto it and allow it to track and move in the right directions, very precisely. And so what happens is in these fractures, especially these kind of lower orbital wall fractures, as those little pieces break, part of the muscles or those tendons attached to the eyeball can get kind of stuck or entrapped in these pieces. And then what will happen is when you examine these patients, they won't be able to kind of fully track. Their eye will kind of block or get stuck in a certain spot. Actually, kind of a really fascinating thing that can happen here. Very uncommon, but there's a thing called the oculocardiac reflex, so eye and heart reflex, which is kind of interesting how that would tie together. But there's a muscle called the inferior rectus that's kind of at the bottom part of the eyeball. And if you have a bad enough fracture here, patients will basically see double vision. In order to compensate for that double vision, they'll look up. And as they look up, that muscle can actually pull on a nerve branch that actually controls cardiac function, and it will basically slow your heart down, and it can actually reach a point where it stops your heart from beating and going to asystole. Obviously, that would be a medical emergency, and those are quite rare, but kind of an interesting phenomenon that can occur. But obviously, in his scenario, that wasn't the case. It's kind of an interesting thing to note. See, I sometimes I think I understand the human body all right, and then I hear something like that where, you look up and it stops your heart and everything just stops making sense to me again.
No good.
Yeah, that's off the alarm bells.
Dr. Brandon, when we talk about recovery here, surgical procedure, healing, and then just getting back on that horse, confidence-wise, it's, stressful enough to get into the batter's box and face some flamethrowers, but if you get hit in the head, let alone the eye, a little PTSD is where I'm going.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that confidence piece in these is a big part of the return. Fortunately for him, I think that confidence piece might be a little bit different just since it was more of a foul tip, but still that's there, and especially if you're somebody who actually gets hit in the eye, if you've been throwing at it, or whether it's a hot shot back at the pitcher's mound, obviously you're going to be a bit gun-shy when it comes to that. But, in terms of return to play with these, very high. The biggest thing always is that ability to kind of regain the tracking portion of this. Then obviously if there was any kind of globe trauma, then obviously that changes that, field of vision. And that whole, obviously, hand-eye coordination is how do you make it to the major leagues as a great hitter? Well, your hand-eye coordination is incredible. You can pick the ball up like nobody else can pick up. And so these kind of things could be, detrimental to somebody's career depending on, one, how much muscular trauma was caused by the injury, and then how well you can kind of get that tracking back. And then ultimately, it's really kind of how much trauma happened to the globe and can that globe fully recover. So you'd be able to redevelop that visualization where you can pick that ball up. And that's obviously really the big thing that, in the early parts of this is kind of hard to determine.
Dr. Brandon, what does the return to injury look like here? Because I remember it was Canelo Alvarez. He fought Billy Joe Saunders was this guy's name back in 2021, early 2021. Billy Joe Saunders got a broken orbital in that fight and has not boxed in a boxing match since. Obviously, you look at it, he probably made some good money boxing Canelo, but that's now almost 3 years past. He still hasn't been able to compete. What's the return to play look like here in this situation?
Yeah, that's a great question. It'd be interesting to know, Elijah, on that. Is it a structural issue? Like, was it such a bad fracture that even put that back together? Was it such a bad fracture that they're worried that, subsequent trauma to that area would essentially re-injure that area? Or is it more an issue of he just doesn't quite have the vision? Did he maybe have a globe-type injury, which is a possibility? I'm not certain in his case. I think, fortunately, in this scenario, at least based on the reports, again, we're kind of getting reports from the media. I have no idea what the real reports are. But at least the ones that are out there in the media, it doesn't sound like any globe trauma. So I think for him, it's pretty high that he gets back and plays really well. But it's really interesting. There's not a tremendous amount of sports medicine data on these ocular fractures in terms of return to play. The big thing we always look at in orthopedics, we've talked about this before, is that return to play at the same level or higher. There's not a lot of that kind of information in the ophthalmology world. So I still think there's definitely a little bit of unpredictability here.
Dr. Brandon Seifert with us, Nebraska Orthopedic Center at Jock Doc Wednesday. We're talking orbital bone fracture and a Yankee prospect that was playing in a split squad game. Foul ball after he got jammed, and Oscar Gonzalez trying to recover with that right orbital fracture. Dr. Brandon, we'll get caught up again. Thanks for a few minutes today.
All right, fellas. Take care.
Good to hear from Dr. Brandon. We'll wind a Wednesday down next.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time, big thanks to Jeremiah Sirles, Evan Bland, and Mr. Husker Football Mike Babcock. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. It's where you go to get the podcast with Hail Varsity. Also, the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Find us also and follow on the Twitter feed at HVarsity Radio. Say it ain't so. The new NCAA president may do away with prop bets and college athletics. It was discussed. Here's a little snippet from Pat McAfee. I haven't dove in, Elijah, to the old prop bets. I do have fun with him occasionally on Fridays when we talk Nebraska football, over under rushing yards, over under touchdown passes. We'll get into it right before the spring game. But this is something that could be a reality.
As somebody who likes a lot of options to gamble on so you can beat the book.
Yes, exactly.
Whenever we read this and talked about this, we immediately were like, not a bad idea there, actually.
Yeah, I thought it was a great idea. And yeah, we talk, and we come at books sometimes for not having options and prop bets out there for some things. But in this case, I think it's genius because, like in Shohei's case, if Shohei was gambling and he's risking $700 million, kind of. Like that, in that situation, like he's risking everything. Now, there are 333, I think, D1 college basketball programs. Like, think about how many college basketball players there are. They're all not going to be millionaires, okay? So they may actually be looking to tempted to, I'm not saying throw games, but to throw their props for sure. So when you take that temptation out of the equation completely for NCAA players, like, I think it's a genius idea because these guys, they aren't risking everything if they're throwing their own props. Okay, like what are they risking? Getting thrown off the team you're never
going to be able to play college basketball again. Sweet.
I wasn't really playing anyway. Yeah. So like in that situation, like pros is different. Like if they're throwing their props, they're risking their entire career. They're risking millions of dollars. But for NCAA kids, it's a pretty tempting thing to do if you're approached by the wrong group of people or something like that. So I think it's genius to take it all away, and then you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, and I think it's also, if people miss out on players' prop bets, you don't just, it's not a direct visceral.
Right.
Nope.
When you're a potential class or the next day, whenever you know exactly, these people have to mingle amongst their peers. Like professional athletes, it kind of comes with it.
Sure.
Like, hey, if you're seen in public, your chance you're going to get a cost. There's going to be things you say. For college athletes, you got to, like after I missed those 2 kicks,
Yeah, exactly.
I had to go to class.
Right.
That was terrible. That was bad.
Yep. 2 field goals missed against Pitt. Rich Rod in West Virginia, chance to go to the Natty. And they lost by 4. Brandon asks, what whiskey am I drinking on International Day of Whiskey? I'm going to go with Jameson. Yeah. Elijah, you doing a little Japanese pour tonight?
I don't think so, considering I don't have any. The one I have at home that I've been enjoying recently is the Bone Snapper Rye whiskey. I think I might be going with that.
Rye's good.
Really high proof. It's spicy. So a little pour will do ya. And that's probably what I'm going to go with tonight. Just a little pour of that just in honor of the day.
Sure. Honor it by buckling up. Use your seatbelt. It saves lives. It prevents injuries only if properly worn. Make it click. This message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. Loaded show tomorrow. Brandon Vogel going to be with us from Counter Reed. We'll have some player thoughts after they meet the media tomorrow around 11. We'll hear from Matt Rhule. We'll check in with Barney, Coach Barnett back, and a Mitch Sherman sighting to release the Fury. Talk to you at 4. Thanks for tuning in to Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager.